Good evening, mates, friends. My name's Russell Moran, and I'm a dude who lives in London in the United Kingdom. You may know some of my other videos that are talking about spirituality and magic. Um, this video is not going to be so much on the subject of magic, but more on the subject of spirituality. And for this video, I want to talk about something that's really awesome and exciting and positive and really positive because sorry, my camera angle is a bit funny. Forgive me. Yeah. I really want to talk about something that's really positive in spirituality, and that thing that's really positive in spirituality is something called reincarnation. Okay. Now we've all heard of reincarnation, but I think maybe there's a little bit of misunderstanding and a little bit of, or not as much understanding as there should be about what reincarnation really is and how reincarnation really works, and about the importance of reincarnation, right? And whether or not reincarnation is really real, right? So this video is about. Sorry, I'm getting really close to the camera. Right. Um, Please forgive my pirate appearance with my big beard and terrible teeth. Okay. Please forgive me. But yeah. Okay. So this video is about reincarnation. Um, and and I want to talk frankly about reincarnation and about what I believe about reincarnation, uh, and about the importance of this concept, because it's not a new concept. The concept of reincarnation has been around for thousands of years, dating back, into prehistory, into ancient India, into ancient Hinduism, and also into ancient Egyptian civilization. The Egyptians certainly believed in reincarnation. The ancient Hindus, the beginnings of the Vedanta and Hinduism, they certainly believed in reincarnation. And then later Buddhism, Buddha talks about reincarnation. So reincarnation is definitely an idea that has been around for a long time, and what is it? What does it mean? And what is it really? Okay, so let's get to that. Okay, reincarnation. Now, talking about reincarnation, I want to start off from my own personal experience. As a young man, as a young boy growing up in London in the United Kingdom, and my first experience of questioning the world and being like, well, what's the world all about? What does it mean to be human? Right? Who am I, etc. Okay? And one of the big questions that myself and my big brother asked when we were children was, what happens to you when you die? Okay? What happens to us when we die? Okay? And this is a huge question. And this is such a huge question for all human beings all over the world. No matter what culture you come from, no matter what civilization, no matter what country you live in, no matter what culture you come from, whether you're American, English, German, Chinese, Japanese, Russian, everybody, every single living person, and I'm pretty certain about this. I mean, I think most human beings, it must be 99.9% of human beings, or maybe even 100% of human beings, have asked this question: what happens to me when I die? We all know that death exists. We all know that we're going to die one day. We all know, our culture knows that death is a thing that happens to people. And yet, there's very little understanding about what really happens to us when we die. Okay? It's a, no shit, guys, girls. It's a taboo subject, right? Like, people don't like talking about this, right? Like, what happens to you when you die? Like, if you bring that up in polite conversation, like at a dinner party, like, this is really funny. This is really funny, right? Because I'm sorry, I'm gonna get sidetracked. Okay, the reason I'm laughing is I'm thinking of Monty Python and the meaning of life, in which there's a dinner party and they meet death, and they're talking about death and the afterlife. Okay, but let's bring it. It is very funny. If you haven't seen it, it's great. Watch it. But let's bring it back to fact, reality. Okay. Um, no matter what culture or what part of the world you live in, you know, we've all human beings have asked this question: what happens to us when we die, right? And the truth is that there isn't any consensus about that, about what happens to us when we die. Okay, there are lots of different cultures in the world that have given different answers to that question about what happens to us when we die, right? So, for example, you know, materialist science says, well, when you die, your brain stops working, your body stops working, and with the end of the physical body, the end of the physical, the end of neurological function in the brain, consciousness dies. That's the end of you. Okay, that's what science says. That's the commonly held belief in science. Okay, fine. That's science's proposition of what happens to us when we die. And then there's Christianity, right, which is a religion as opposed to science. And Christianity says, well, when you die, your spirit travels out of your body, and there's some kind of, now I'm not an expert on Christian theology, so I'll just have to sort of give my best explanation. Is that Christianity says, well, you travel out of your body, and like God judges you, right? And God is like, have you been good or have you been bad? He's a bit like Father Christmas. Have you been naughty or nice? Right? Have you been naughty or nice? Right? God's like, have you been a good person or have you been a bad person? If you're a good person, you go to heaven. If you're a bad person, you go to hell. Right? That's Christianity. Okay. And in the East, in India and China, right now, I don't know much about Chinese religion. I don't know that much about, Taoism. I know it a little bit, so I don't know much about it. We can talk a little bit about that in a minute. One thing I do know a lot about is Hinduism, right? The Indian religion, which is actually the oldest religion in the world, and they have quite a comprehensive uh, ideology and theology about what happens to you when you die, right? Now, in Hinduism, so material science says that when you die, your consciousness blinks out and you're dead. That's the end. That's everything. It's like going to sleep forever, right? Christianity says, well, no, that's not what happens. When you die, actually your spirit, your soul, your consciousness travels out of your body and is judged by God, and you either go to heaven or you go to hell. Fine, fair enough, right? May be true, maybe not, may not be true. But then if you look at Hinduism, the Eastern religions, they have a much more comprehensive. It's actually kind of similar to Christianity, but they have a more comprehensive ideology of this, and they say that when you die, yeah, your consciousness lives on. So it's not the same as materialism. Your consciousness lives on, and you go to another reality, right? That is in accordance or in harmony with your karma, right? I depending on the kind of person you are, depending on the kind of person that you've been in your life. Like if you've been a really good person and you've done nothing but good in your entire life and you've always gone around helping people and being nice, right? Then surely after you die, right, you'll end up going to a place where everyone's nice and everyone's good and everyone's kind, right? But if you've been a real ass, if you've been a bit of a bitch in life, and you've done bad things and you've hurt people and stuff, then you may end up going to this place, where bad people are, right? Okay. Now, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I am not a religious scholar. I am not a religious scholar by any means. By any means. Okay. I've studied religion to some degree, and actually, my understanding of the subject of reincarnation doesn't come from Hinduism. It comes from Buddhism. Okay. So I'm a bit of a mix and matcher in terms of religious ideas. Okay, I hope you forgive me for that, for not being an expert, right? But actually, my profound or my deepest understanding of reincarnation, and that's what this video is about, the concept of reincarnation, is my deepest understanding of reincarnation comes from Buddhism. Okay, so in Buddhism, right, there is this amazing concept in Buddhism called the Bhava chakra, right? And that means, I'm pretty sure Bhava chakra, I mean it's Sanskrit, so it's the ancient language of India, and Bhava chakra means the wheel of life, right? Like the Lion King. Oh no, that's the circle of life. That's the circle of life. Oh, it's kind of similar. It's a similar. It really is a similar concept. The Bhava chakra, although the Bhava chakra is talking about the afterlife and what happens to us after we die, it is fundamentally similar to the concept of the circle of life in the Lion King, right? And we all love the Lion King. It's lovely film by Disney. Yeah, bless them. Right. So, but the Bhava chakra is a very interesting concept, especially in Buddhism, because the Bhava chakra seeks to explain to us what happens to our consciousness after we die. Okay, and the Bhava chakra is divided. It's a circle, and it's sort of a work of art. I suppose we can actually just, since we're talking about it, I suppose we just take a look at it. That's Pope Francis, because I'm a bit of a spiritual guy. I like the Pope. I like that Pope. He's a good lad. But let's check out the Bhava chakra on Wiki. All right, Bhava chakra. So yeah, this is the Bhava chakra. Okay, and this isn't actually the greatest illustration of it. But basically, it's a wheel. It's a wheel that depicts. It's a wheel that depicts the various different planes of existence or states of consciousness that a human being can go to after their physical body dies, right? And the thing that's funny is that fundamentally it's very similar. It's very similar to the Christian idea of heaven and hell. Okay, so basically Buddhism and Hinduism, because I'm pretty sure the Bhava chakra actually fundamentally comes from Hinduism, and this was sort of it grew and was inculcated into Buddhism, right? The idea of the Bhava chakra, it's very similar. It's very similar. That's my mouse pointer. Sorry. The idea of the Bhava chakra is very similar to the concept of heaven and hell, right? In Christianity. So basically, these two religions that were separated by thousands of miles and complete different cultures basically had the same ideas, right? Like, you die and either you go to heaven or you go to hell, right? Is that real? Is that true? Right? Cheers. I'm drinking some beer. It's Polish beer. Nice beer. So, is that real? Is that true? These were the ideas created by people who lived thousands of years ago about what happens to us after we die, right? And that's what these people really believed. Were they just insane? Were they just delusional? Did they not really know anything about the world and they just made up these ideas because they didn't know about science, right? Because that's what science will tell you, okay? Science will tell you there's no evidence of the afterlife, and the afterlife isn't real. When your body dies, your consciousness dies. That's fine. That's what science tells us. But religion, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism, Shintoism of the religion of Japan, tells us something different, which is that our spirit lives on, and our spirit can even manifest in certain ways after we're dead. Okay, I'm just gonna smoke a cigarette. I hope you forgive me. It's just my way. All right, it helps me think. And when I was a young boy, I was an atheist. Okay, I didn't believe in God. And me and my big brother used to have philosophical conversations about the nature of life and the nature of death. And me and my big brother talked for many hours, many hours in our childhood home. And we came to the conclusion, me and my brother, young as we were, I was about 6 or 7, 8, and he was like 14, and we'd have conversations. We came to the conclusion, one, that God didn't exist, and two, that when you die, that's the end. Like, consciousness blinks out, and that's just the end of everything, okay? And that was a conclusion that both me and my brother came to. Like, me and my brother were both atheists, right? Um, so as a child, for the first 13, 14 years of my life, I was an atheist, and I believed that, materialism was everything there is, and there wasn't anything beyond materialism, and like when your physical body dies, that's the end. Okay? But that's a fair enough belief. In a way, it's a perfectly reasonable belief. Okay? If you don't have any other evidence, it's a perfectly reasonable belief. But after the age of 14, when I was a young man, I started to have other experiences, which really led me down different avenues of thought and avenues of exploration about what really happens to you when you die. Okay. As much, like I literally had started off having having conversations about like what is the meaning of life and what happens to you when you die with my brother when I was like 8, right? So I was like started thinking about these things as a really young age, right? But by the time I was a young teenager, by the time I was 14, I was introduced to the counterculture in the United Kingdom in the 1990s, and it was a time of great sort of fervor. People were really excited about these ideas, and it was also a time of great ferment in terms of like spiritual ideas and like the sort of relearning or the reimagining of spiritual ideas in the West, in the 90s. With like a renewed hippie movement that had come about in the 80s and 90s because of acid house and the rave movement, right? Like a resurgence of hippieism, okay, in the 90s. Um, and no doubt to some degree I'm a product of that. And a resurgence of Eastern ideas in the West in the 90s, right? I'm not going to make any apologies for being, a child of that time. I undoubtedly am, and it undoubtedly had an effect on me. I don't think that has any relevance to how true or not true these ideas are. Either an idea is true or it's not. You know, like gravity, Einstein's theory of relativity is culture independent, right? Either Einstein's theory of relativity is true, and if it's true, if it's really true, then it's true for all people all across the world, right? And we find that to be true, right? So it doesn't matter if you're Chinese, Japanese, South American, American, English, Einstein's relativity is true. So the same is also true of reincarnation. It is a fundamental concept about what happens to you when you die, right? And it doesn't matter whether or not I grew up in a hippie movement, or whether or not I grew up in a 100% secular family, whether I grew up in a Jewish family, or whether I grew up in a Chinese family. What matters is whether or not the idea is true or not. Is reincarnation real? Like, is that what happens to you when you die? Does the spirit continue? Now, science tells us that it doesn't, okay? As we've already established. But spirituality tells us that it does. So spirituality definitely tells us, the spiritual, the religions of the world, the spiritual doctrines of this world definitely tell us that consciousness persists after death, right? Are they right? Is Christianity, is Buddhism, is Hinduism right about this? Are they right or are they wrong? And that's what I'm talking about. Are they right or are they wrong? And what evidence do we have to know either way? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what is the evidence. What is the evidence for life after death? Right. Now, surely, if there was no evidence for life after death, then we would have to come to the same conclusion as modern science, which would just be that when you die, that's the end of consciousness, that's the end of your life, it's the end of your individuality, your body dies, and you die with it. Okay, that's one working hypothesis. Okay, that's a totally reasonable working hypothesis. I accept that as a hypothesis. Okay, I do not accept it as 100% validated fact, because now if there was no evidence to the contrary, I would accept it as 100% validated fact. However, there is significant evidence to the contrary of that materialistic science conclusion. There is significant evidence from the testimony of human beings that the death of the physical body is not the end. Right? That consciousness and individual consciousness, i.e. individual personality, actually persists after death. Right? That when the physical body dies, the individual consciousness persists and continues on some other plane of existence or in some other dimension. Okay? Now this is very fantastical. It's very fantastical, but there is no evidence. There is no evidence that can prove that it's wrong, that it's not true. Okay. However, there is significant evidence that suggests that it might be true, that it may be the case. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that evidence. Let's talk a little bit about that evidence. Okay. So there was a great scientist and researcher called Richard Strassman. David Strassman? Oh, sorry, I forgot his name. Let me just get his book off. Rick Strassman. I think it's Rick Strassman. Okay. Now, here it is. This is a great. Oh, here it is. Okay, here we go. Rick Strassman, DMT spirit molecule. A doctor's revolutionary research into the biology of near-death and mystical experiences. Okay, by Rick Strassman, MD. Okay, now, nice guy, definitely cool dude. Like not a quack, genuine scientist. You know, who went into the research of near-death experiences and psychedelic experiences. You know, with an open mind. You know, not decided either way. Let's do a proper scientific experiment. This is proper scientific research. Okay. Now I'm going to be totally honest with you. I have not read all of that book. I've read about half of it. Okay. But I've read a lot of other stuff, and I've had a lot. You know, I don't claim to be a great academic or a great scientist. I'm just a guy called Russell who lives in Hackney in the United Kingdom. Okay, right. I don't claim to be a great academic. I'm just being myself and talking about things that I find fascinating. So you know, so Rick Strassman, you know, conducted a lot of research, wrote this book about it called DMT Spirit Molecule. And I've had my own experiences. Okay, so I've had personal experiences of my own, you know, and it has to be that way in the sense that, like, I couldn't believe that reincarnation was real, that reincarnation is a real thing, or that life after death is a real thing, if I hadn't had very significant experiences myself, which have led me to the conclusion that life after death must be real. That the evidence for it, that the testimony for it, is so compelling as to be unequivocal, right? You know, it's there's no way you can. Well, you can in theory dispute it, but it's the evidence, or the testimony and the evidence is so strong, right, that it must be real, right? And that's really what you know, the conclusion of Rick Strassman's book is as well, which is that, like, he, you know, and he went into it with an open mind as an empirical objective scientist, and conducted case studies of people you know, taking psychedelic drugs, but he also interviewed people who'd had near-death experiences, i.e., that, like, people who died physically, clinically died, like their heart had stopped for periods of time, and they'd then been resuscitated by medics, and then they'd come back and they'd said, like, yeah, I was, like, clinically dead on the stretcher, and, like, I saw shit. I was alive, right? Like, my consciousness was still going on while my body was dead, right? And they report experiences of this, right? Now, I don't know. I'm not an expert on near-death experiences at all. But, like, I mean, the evidence, the testimony is compelling, because one thing you got to do in life, okay? From my point of view, one thing you got to do in life, right, is you can't go around calling everybody else stupid, okay? You have to meet each person, at every single person you meet, you have to meet that individual person at face value, and just talk to that individual as an individual, and meet them as an individual, and listen to what they have to say, right? Undoubtedly, there are some stupid people out there who make shit up, and they're bad people, and they make shit up, right? Nobody likes that kind of person. But there are other people out there who are good people, honest people, that you can talk to, and they will tell you compelling experiences of life after death experiences. Okay, don't have a beer. Um, I don't have, I personally, I don't have any preference. I don't have any preference towards any one idea or the other. I don't want, there's the whole thing in X-Files, like with UFOs and stuff. I want to believe. I'm not like that. I'm really not like that. Okay, I don't want to believe in anything. What I want is to discover the truth. Right? That's what I want. I'm interested in the truth. It's the only thing I've ever been interested in since the beginning that I can remember being an intellectual being. As a little child, I just want to know what's real. I want to know what the truth is. I want to know how the world works. I want to know who I am. I want to know what the universe is. I just want to know the truth. Right? If the truth is, as materialistic science says, that like our body dies and our consciousness blinks out and that's the end, I will accept that. I will 100% accept that if that is what the truth is. Okay? Because I'm interested in the truth. I'm an empiricist. I believe in the power of the human senses to collect information. Okay, but if I'm an honest empiricist, if I'm an honest scientist, I have to admit that there is at least a possibility that that may not be the whole truth. There may be something else beyond that, right? And like I said, I don't have any preference. I didn't want to find one way or the other. I was open-minded, right? I actually wrote a poem when I was 14 years old. I wrote a poem when I was 14 years old, and the poem went like this. I hope I can remember it. I hope I can remember it. The poem was called Solidarity, and it went like this. Who am I to question the beautiful sky? Religion or science? I've missed a line. Religion or science? If the truth would present itself, I would receive it as a guest. Who am I to question the beautiful sky? Religion or science? If the truth would present itself, I would receive it as a guest. Right? I'm not quoting the whole poem, but that was the gist of it. Okay. Um, and that was a kind of prayer on my part. It was like, I want to know the truth. Right? I don't want any bullshit. I'm not partisan to science or religion. I just want to know what the truth is. Right? Um, and honestly, the truth, and up until that point, and I wrote that poem when I was like 14, and I was still an atheist. And like after that, things began to change for me, and I began to experience spiritual phenomenon. Okay, so let's stop beating around the bush. Okay, I'm a spiritualist. Okay, I'm a spiritualist. Right, I'm a spiritual man. Um, I'm kind of religious. Right, like I believe in God, and I sometimes very rarely go to church, but I believe in believe in Christian ethics, not so much in Christian theology. Um, but I am a spiritual man, so let's stop being around the bush. I've given my explanation of my understanding of what science is and materialism and secularism about. Like, okay, like we should certainly be skeptical about things, and I'm totally in agreement with that. But excuse me, I'm just gonna grab a beer. Right, I'll be back. One sec. but I have experienced such compelling evidence for the existence of life after death that there can be absolutely no doubt in my mind. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that life after death is real. Okay, that our consciousness persists after death, right? But not only our consciousness, but our personalities, right? So us as individuals persists after the death of our bodies. Okay, so me, Russell Morahan, you know, when my body dies, right, my body will die, right? This body, you know, this thing that I inhabit is going to die, okay, eventually. But when it dies, the spirit, the consciousness that inhabits this and that animates this body will not die, and it will persist. And I have very significant, uh, you know, testimony and experiences that have shown me this to be true without any doubt. Okay, and I'm going to tell you now about some of those experiences. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to tell you about some of those experiences. Cheers. Polish beer. It's Tysky. Yeah. Good shit. It's quite a nice beer, actually. It's, you know, it's good. It's good beer. So I'm going to tell you about those experiences. Now, first off, I'm going to talk about something very personal and close to my heart, which is you know, which is the death of my brother. Okay, so I grew up in Hackney in London, and I grew up and I had an older brother called Leon Morahan, and he was 8 years older than me. So when I was 0, he was 8, and I grew up with him, and we grew up in the same household. And he was a great brother. Like, he was a really good brother. Like, he was a big brother. He was fun. He was exciting. He was energetic. We used to go play football together. You know, he used to bring home VHS movies, and we'd watch. Like, first watched the first Predator movie in the 1980s, when my brother brought home the Predator video, and like he brought back. This is fucked up. It's a fucked up story, right? But my brother. I'm so sorry about this. This crime is not cool, but I'm pretty sure that my brother stole a VHS player. Or I don't know. I'm not sure he stole it, but he got it through some devious means. Because like in the 80s, if you had VHS players were expensive, right? VHS players were expensive. And I don't know how we got the VHS player, because we certainly didn't pay for it. My brother didn't pay for it, right? But somehow we got a VHS player, and we had a TV in our room, and my brother brought back the Predator film, and we used to watch videos when I was like 6 and he was like 12, right? No, 14. Anyway, he was not a bad man. So I grew up with my brother, and I knew him very well. We weren't the closest, but I still knew him. I mean, if you live with someone for 14, live with someone for, you know, yeah, 10. You live with, because he left when I was like 10. He moved out when I was 10, when he was 18. So lived with someone 10 years, and we stayed friends, brothers, after he left. So um, and my brother experimented with psychedelics, and he had his own spiritual experiences. So at the same time that I was going through a spiritual transformation of changing my ideas from that of atheism to that of you know, modern New Age spirituality, my brother was doing the same. You know, he was going through that same transformation. You know, he'd started out an atheist, but he just experienced things on psychedelics, on LSD, that just changed his mind. You know, and it was the same for me. I just changed my mind. I was like, okay, these experiences are just so real and so profound, it's just impossible for them to be nonsense. Okay, so that's one thing. You know, psychedelics are definitely an important aspect of the they're definitely an important aspect of the communion between life and death, right? Life and the afterlife. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what Timothy Leary, excuse me, what Timothy Leary talks about in the psychedelic experience by Timothy Leary. It's a translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead is a Buddhist book about about life after death, about what happens to you when you die, right? And Timothy Leary, the wise, psychedelic voyager that he was able to translate the Tibetan Book of the Dead and apply it to modern Western psychedelic experience, and it's a fantastic book. One of my favourites, actually. It's one of my favourite books. I haven't read it for years, but it's a beautiful book, right? In which he translates Tibetan Buddhism into Western psychedelic experience, and it's fascinating, right? So, but sadly, my brother was not a happy man, and in 2004 he killed himself. Okay, he took some tabs of ecstasy and threw himself off a building. I probably shouldn't have told you that, because I think you're going to think that he was a bad person, or that I was a bad person. But anyway, he died, and me and my mother went to see him in the hospital, and yeah, he's dead now. I haven't seen him in 16 years. Yeah. However, he's been in my dreams. He's been in my dreams ever since. Probably dreamed of him like 2 weeks ago. But he's definitely been there. He's been there in my dreams. Like, yeah, like once a week. I probably dream of him once a week. And I probably dreamt of him once a week for the last 16 years. Okay? So my big brother Leon, he's dead. He's still there in my dreams. He's been there in my dreams for the last 16 years. Now the thing is that when I meet him in my dreams, that's Leon. That's my brother. And he feels like my brother. He looks like my brother. He behaves like my brother. Right? But he behaves so authentically in my dreams, like him, right, that it cannot possibly be me, right? Because I'm not him. I'm not him. Okay? I knew him fairly well. I knew him fairly well. Okay? But I'm not him. Okay? I'm not Leon. Right? I'm a distinct person. I'm Russell. I'm Russell Morahan. He's Leon Morahan. And we were completely different people. Very different people. Yeah, we had some things in common, but we were very different people fundamentally, right? We had a very different way of doing things. I'm a much more kind of peaceful, kind of philosophical person. He was much more hot-headed and, passionate. He was into kind of hard music and hard living, and I wasn't like him, and I couldn't be like him. Like I couldn't. Like I do not believe that my brain has the ability to recreate Leon. Leon as an individual, right? But yeah, I dream of him once or twice a month, and he's him. It's Leon, and I don't understand it because I don't have the ability to recreate him as a person, and yet he acts completely independently in my dreams and does shit that I would never think of. It doesn't make any sense. Where does that information come from? Where does it come from? It doesn't make any sense. Yeah? And science can't explain it. Science has no explanation for dreams, right? My personal conclusion is that my brother is still alive. Yeah? His body has died. His body is dead. His body, you know, is not going to be resurrected. It's actually ashes. It's ashes, right? That have been sprinkled somewhere. But sad, he's dead, right? But his consciousness lives on, right? And I'm really certain of that. Like I really feel it in my heart that he's still alive. You know, like I can feel him. Now, okay, so let's go on to another. Let's go on to another. Just slightly anecdotal, but like, in my teenage years, I used to dream of Jimi Hendrix. Okay, so I would dream that I was hanging out with Jimi Hendrix, and like me and Jimi Hendrix would like hang out together. And it was like I was in a dream, and it was like Jimi Hendrix was there, man, and Jimi Hendrix was being fucking Jimmy, right? And he was great. Like he was a really friendly, happy, friendly guy, you know. I don't know anything about the man, right? I think I'd listened to like one of his albums, but like somehow, and I literally when I was a teenager, I really didn't know anything about Jimi Hendrix, other than I'd like listened to like the Jimi Hendrix experience, like a best of. Like I hadn't seen many photos of him, I didn't know much about the guy, but somehow in my dreams, I met Jimi Hendrix, and Jimi Hendrix was like he was like the real fucking deal in my dreams. Like he was real. He was like a this really cool guy, like black, you know, afro, you know, funny, kind person. And I'm like, how the fuck? Where the fuck does that? How does that come out of my mouth, out of my mind? Because I can't explain that. I can't explain that in my brain, according to neuroscience and materialistic science. It doesn't make any sense. Okay. What I believe is that was the disincarnate spirit of Jimi Hendrix visiting me, right? Because we're friends spiritually. He's a nice man, and hopefully he thinks the same about me. Maybe not. He's like, Russell, that fucking asshole. Yeah, or maybe he thinks I'm alright. I don't know. But we used to be friends, in my understanding, because I don't believe that my brain can create Jimi Hendrix out of nothing. There must be an explanation for how I could dream of somebody and experience that person beyond myself. You know, like those that consciousness, the consciousness of that dream behaves autonomously. I, Russell Moore, have no control of it. The characters in my dreams, they behave autonomously. Like I I I'm not controlling them. They have their own will, right? So how can one brain create me, and I have a will and I take actions, but then there are these other entities, these other spiritual beings around me that are doing shit in my dreams that that has nothing to do with me. It must be because they're spirits, right? And then when we're dreaming, we're traveling on we're traveling on the astral plane. We're traveling when we dream. We go into the spirit world, right? That is the rational explanation. Okay, that to me that is the rational explanation. Okay, now that's all very interesting, and I hope you found that really interesting because that's what I really believe. Okay, and I want to conclude by talking about the broader societal and civilization level implications of reincarnation, of what reincarnation means for human civilization and for society as a larger whole. And I'm going to talk about that, and then I'm going to conclude the video. But before I talk about that, I need to go and take a piss. So I hope you forgive me, because it's the beer, you see. This is the problem, it's the beer. Right? So I'm just going to go AFK for like 3 minutes. Okay, 3 minutes. Alright, and then I'll get back. Hopefully you can skip ahead in the video if you want to skip the 3 minutes of me not being here. Okay, I'm going to be right back. Safe. Alright, I'm back. I'm back. Sorry for the absence. Thank you for your patience. Thank you. So, reincarnation. Excuse me. I'm doing my button. It's like I'm fat and nearly 40. Ah. um, Reincarnation. Okay, so reincarnation is an idea that has been around in human civilization for a long time, right? Yeah, like since the Egyptian civilization, and since the Hindu civilization. Okay. Now, what's really fascinating about reincarnation, and why I think reincarnation is such a positive, and there's like so many reasons why it's such a positive ideology. Not only because it's true, but the reasons why it's such a positive ideology, um, is because it explains human civilization. Okay, and it explains human civilization in a very profound way, right? And I know this is gonna sound really controversial, okay? But you got to. I hope you'll take this in the right way, okay? Because it's not. Because this is meant in the best possible sense. But reincarnation explains inequality in the world, okay? And I'm now just gonna. And what it does is it links inequality to the evolution of consciousness, and it says reincarnation as a principle says that inequality is a consequence of the evolution of consciousness, right? It doesn't do away with equality as a principle. You know, no one's disputing the concept of equality as a principle. You know, as in the Constitution or the Bill of Human Rights. All men and women are all humans are created equal in the eyes of the law. We all have certain inalienable rights for the pursuit of life, love, liberty, and happiness. Right? No one's disagreeing with that. Okay, those are great principles, and we should definitely herald and champion those principles. Okay. What reincarnation is saying is that we need to think logically and clearly about how living beings are brought into this world and where those living beings come from and what their origins and circumstances are. Okay, so let's look at it like this, right? Let's look at it like this. Okay, so we know that life originated on planet Earth about 3 billion years ago, but life 3 billion years ago, it's a very long time ago. Life then was, the Earth is 4 billion years old. Life 3 billion years ago was basically bacteria, right? Microorganisms. And as far as I'm aware, for about a billion years, or about half a billion years, about 500 million years, there was basically nothing going on. There was just basically lots of like microorganisms. Now, I'm not once again, I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. I've read lots of stuff, but I'm not an expert on many of these subjects. So as far as I understand, for about 500 million years, nothing much was going on. And then 500, sort of about 2 billion years ago. This is really an estimate. Sorry, about 2 billion years ago, plants appeared, right? And then plants, basically cyanobacteria, blue-green algae turned up, right? And they were growing in the seas, and engaging in photosynthesis, and they converted all the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere into oxygen, and and there was very long, slow process of terraformation on planet Earth for like the next billion years, right? Until multicellular life appeared about 2 billion years into 2 billion years, right? 2 billion years, insane amount of time. I might be wrong about these timescales, but about 2 billion years into the Earth's history, suddenly, multicellular organisms started turning up, right? And at that time, multicellular organisms were quite rare, and we're talking, and this type, this age we're talking about really simple things, like amoebas, etc. Right? And then a few million years later, you start getting fish, basic fish, and then you got bigger fish, and then more fish, and then like big fish, and then slowly but surely, like 100 and a billion years ago, like fish start coming out. My knowledge of the evolutionary timeline is balked. I don't know it very well at all. But basically, you've got this gradual process of the evolution of life on this planet, right? Now, fast forwards, okay, to the first human beings, okay? Now, basically, when the first human beings started out on this planet, right, there weren't very many of us, right? It was hundreds of thousands of years, or tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years of us basically being apes, right? Being some form of ape. But there weren't that many of them, right? Like, apes didn't take over the planet. There was lots of apes, but not that many of them. The ape population was still relatively small. And, around, a million years ago, literally just a million or 2 million years ago, apes started to become something different. And there really wasn't that many of us, right? Like, the number of, like, sort of Neanderthal style creatures that came out were in the millions, small quantities of us, right? And for thousands of years, the population of the human civilization was really fairly small, relatively. Hundreds of thousands, or small numbers of millions of humans. Okay. And this literally went on until 10,000 years ago. And it's only in the last 10,000. So think about it like this. Imagine that, and this is speculation in terms of the numbers, but the concept is correct. Is that, imagine 10,000 years ago, there was literally 10,000 years ago, there was only 1 million human beings on planet Earth, right? Or like primitive human beings 10,000 years ago. And then 5,000 years ago, there was like 5 million human beings. And then 2,000 years ago, there was like 20 million human beings. So there's like long periods of time when just it was a very small population increase, right? And then you got 1,000 years of the Dark Ages, and then the Renaissance. And it's only in the last 1,000 years that we've begun to see really exponential population growth of the human species. Okay, like, we've always been an alpha predator, right? We've always been at the top of the food chain for a long time, right? All right, lions and elephants can certainly eat us, but we're clever and etc. Right? So we've been at the top of the food chain for a long time, but our population was relatively small until the last 1,000 years. And in the last 1,000 years, our population has just exponentially increased. Until now, in 2021, we are by far the most populous species on this planet. And we've completely overtaken this planet. Now, if you believe in reincarnation, as I do, the concept and the rules of reincarnation grant some very significant insight into the nature of modern civilization and into the nature of modern society when you begin to understand that individual human spirits, individual human consciousnesses do not die at the end of an individual lifetime, but they when a person dies, their soul goes into the spirit world, into the astral plane, spends some time in the astral plane, in my experience between 50 and 250 years, and then they get reincarnated again into another body. And with each of these reincarnations, they grow in experience and in spiritual awareness and in spiritual power, right? So basically what you've got is you've got this kind of evolutionary kind of pyramid. Pyramids. I don't know why I'm bringing up a pyramid. But basically you've got a sort of a growth upwards. So basically you've got like people, individual souls, right? And this is the fundamental. Like what I'm explaining to you is not fundamentally different from what the Buddhists. This is like the same stuff that Buddha said, right? That like it takes thousands of years to become a Buddha because you have to be reincarnated hundreds of times before you become enlightened, right? So it's fundamentally what I'm saying is fundamentally the same as Buddhism and probably the same as the Egyptian religion too, right? So basically, imagine it like this, right? Like, 100 million years ago. Or sorry, not 100 million years ago. So 100,000 years ago were the first human beings. The first human beings as we know them today, right? And there weren't very many of them. There was like a million or two of them, right? 100,000 years ago. And they didn't live very long. They lived like 30, 40 years each time, right? And they would die and get reincarnated. And they would die and get reincarnated, right? And the most potent spirits would get reincarnated, right? So if you were at the top of the scale in terms of evolutionary consciousness, you get reincarnated again, over and over again. Maybe not every generation, but over multiple generations, you would get reincarnated over and over again and gain more life experience. Maybe for hundreds of generations, over 100,000 years, right? And if you conceive of the notion that the human spirit is immortal, right, then these people keep on getting incarnated, right? And then you have this situation where basically 90,000 years later, 10,000 years ago, you've got a civilization which has multiplied tenfold, right? So 10,000 years ago, the population is like 5 million or 10 million, when 100,000 years ago it was only like 1 million or 500,000, right? So you've got 10 times the amount of people, and some of those people, right? So the idea is that with every new person that you get, you need to get a spirit from somewhere. And a lot of the time, those spirits, if they're not coming from people who've already been incarnated as humans, they're coming from animals. So sometimes you get people who literally, they're living as humans, but it's like their first time as a spiritual being that they've ever been a human. In their previous life, they might have been an elephant, or a tiger, or a giraffe, or a shark, right? So you get a civilization that is a mixture, right, of these older souls who were around at the very beginning of the Neanderthal period, like 100,000 years ago, who've been reincarnating multiple times as humans, and have actually started learning how to be human, and started learning language and getting good at language, and their souls have actually been gaining information, and they've been learning shit, right? And they've been incarnating over and over and over again over 100,000 year period. This is like 100 generations, 200 generations, right? 200 fucking lifetimes. that they've died and been reincarnated, grown. You lived as like, you know, proto-humans up into the modern era, up until 10,000 years ago when civilization began and agriculture began, right? And you've got these humans you've got these some humans, right, who've lived like 50 or 100 lifetimes as humans, and then at the same time you've got these other humans, right, who their last life as reincarnated beings was as like an elephant or a giraffe, and they're literally first, like what I like to call first lifers, right? And believe me, I'm not trying to establish a cult. This is just my colloquial way of explaining it, right? But you've literally got these spiritual beings who've never lived as a human before, but there's a shortage in the spiritual world of beings who've had experiences living as humans. Like there's more people getting born, and so you start having to draw the biological system starts having to draw from the pool of souls, right, that are not human, right? That are animal. They start having to draw from, and this is the whole evolution of whole spiritual evolution of consciousness on the planet. That the human bodies start drawing in souls from sort of other other sort of less advanced life forms like elephants and giraffes, right, and dolphins, etc. Okay, and so you start getting people incarnated into bodies, right, who've not literally never, right, and that is why, and this is what's so fascinating about the concept of reincarnation, it explains why there is inequality in the world. Okay, it's not because the older souls are more valuable and the younger souls are less valuable, right? Okay, I'm a humanist, and I fundamentally believe in the fundamental equality of all living beings, right? And the universal compassion and universal love for all living things. Okay, so I don't, I literally, I can meet like a squirrel in the park, and I'm like, yeah, man, the squirrel, I regard it with the same love and the same compassion I regard another human being. Okay, like, I mean, there's some differentials, but like ultimately, like, I love squirrels and they're great, right? This is not. I'm not making a case for like, well, we're older souls and therefore we can oppress and fuck over those younger people, right? No, what I'm trying to say is that is why there is hierarchy in society. That is why there has always been hierarchy in human civilization, because there has always been a disparity between the people, the spiritual beings who had multiple incarnations and been born multiple times, and the being, the other human beings who literally, this was their first time being a human. Last life they were a fucking hyena, right? Last life they were a shark, right? Last life they were a tiger, right? And this life is literally their first time being human, and they're just not that clever. They're not that skilled at being human. They haven't learnt language that well, because reincarnation carries this idea that your consciousness, literally your ability to understand language, your ability to understand complex thought, is not carried through the body, is not carried entirely through genetics and through DNA, but is actually carried to a significant degree through your spiritual consciousness, right? This explains human civilization. This explains why human civilization is the way it is. Oh no, my my computer decided to do the screensaver thing, right? Sorry, it decided to switch off my monitor because there was no thing going on. Oh, I'm back, right? So I think that's because the video's gone on for longer than an hour now, right? But if we take the same idea and we carry it forward into understanding modern civilization, right? What this does is that what this does. Sorry, I was just finding some Rizzler. What this does is that this enables us to understand. This enables us to understand inequality. Okay, and I am not advocating for inequality. I do not agree with inequality. I do not believe in inequality. I think that inequality is fundamentally unjust. I'm a socialist, right? And I believe in inequality for all, right? But it explains why inequality exists. And the reason why inequality exists is because of reincarnation, right? Because all souls, all human spirits, all living sentient beings on this planet are not equal, right? Some of us were born before others, right? And I don't think that's some kind of like celestial preference, like God was like, oh, well, I'm going to give this guy a head start. I'm going to give that guy a head start, and the others can fuck off. Right? I don't think it's like that. I honestly just think it's random, right? Like, I really don't want to big myself up at all. Okay, but I think I'm a fairly old soul, and I have of course I would say that, we all do. We all like to think that we're all special, right? But I have memories, kind of. I have vague emotional memories of being a woolly mammoth. 200,000 years ago, in the Arctic wastes of northern Russia, right? Like, I have some kind of emotional, spiritual connection to woolly elephants 200,000 years ago, right? Now, I can't confirm that for you. I can't say to you with absolute 100% fact, but I have some kind of emotional, spiritual synergy with those ideas, right? It's subtle and it's a gentle idea, but it means something to me, and I truly believe it. I truly, and I'm speaking to you 100% honestly. I truly 100% believe that maybe 200,000, 300,000 years ago, I, Russell Morahan, was a woolly mammoth living in the northern parts of the Russian continent with a tribe of woolly mammoths 300,000 years ago, like before modern humans, before modern, right? That I literally lived an entire lifetime. It may have been 50 years. That's how long those things live, as a woolly mammoth, right? Like wandering the Arctic wastes with my family of woolly mammoths, right? And I have some recollection of it in some strange way, you know. And this is all deeply rooted in the concept of the evolution of consciousness. And so, through this concept of reincarnation, through the understanding of reincarnation, we can truly begin to understand where our consciousness has come from, how our consciousness has truly been created, right? What we really are as living spiritual beings in the 21st century of this planet, right? And I think that's beautiful. And I think it's profound. It's incredibly profound to get in touch with our ancient history, with our root. Reconnect with our roots of what we really are as living beings. And I think and once again, it has such relevant implications for understanding why there is inequality in the world. Because if you understand that human beings are part of this grand evolution of consciousness, in which sentient beings slowly evolve over multiple lifetimes, then and I'm not going to be rude, but basically it can explain why in our world a lot of people are stupid. Okay? Yeah? Because there are a lot of stupid people on the earth. And I'm not being rude to them, but they're stupid. They're ignorant, they're uneducated, they lack many of the intellectual skills that are required to be successful and happy in this world, against the backdrop of modern capitalism with very highly educated, skilled people. And there are many people in this world who have very little education, right? But also, it's like where they get incarnated is to do with their evolution of consciousness, right? Yeah. Of course, you can dismiss everything I'm saying and say everything I'm saying is total nonsense. Fair enough. Yeah. But I think evolution. Sorry, I think reincarnation. Yeah, I mean evolution is certainly part of this whole subject. But I think reincarnation explains the evolution of consciousness and gives us some important insights into it. The most profound and lovely thing about reincarnation, if you believe in it, is that it does say that the human spirit is eternal and that our consciousness doesn't die when our body does. So hopefully our individual characters will live on and grow and continue into the future. So we might. I always find it really funny. We all love futuristic ideas, like the idea of having spaceships and flying in spaceships, and like many of my friends are like, "Oh, I'm so sad that I'll never get to see that." And I'm like, "Dude, you will get to see that. Like, you will get to see. You will get to fly in a spaceship. Like, you, as a person, will get to fly in a spaceship. You won't be the same person you are now. You won't have the same body. You may have a different name, but it will be you, and you will get to fly in a spaceship in 2,000 years when human beings have like solved all of our problems and like made the Earth perfect, and when we develop technology so that we can all have spaceships, like personal interplanetary spaceships, in the same way that everybody has cars today, right? It can happen, in 2,000 years, right? I mean, look how much has changed in the last 2,000 years, right? I think deep down we all have a profound problem with the concept of mortality, right? None of us can imagine dying, like really dying, because we don't. Because our spirits are eternal and immortal. And I think that's cool. I like that. I think that's a good thing. Alright. And on that note, I hope you found my talk on reincarnation interesting. I know it's been a long video, but I hope it's been interesting and informative, and I hope that you've found the things I've said as fascinating as I find them. Right. On that note, I will wish you a good night, and peace and love. Peace and love.